Now, if anyone here knows my family, then you know we are die-hard Philadelphia Eagle fans, right? Woo-hoo! Yeah. Okay. And therefore, it is no surprise when the Disney film Invincible came out, the story of Vince Papale, this ordinary guy who ends up having beat the extraordinary odds and gets a 1 in a gazillion chance to be a Philadelphia Eagle. Well, we have watched this film. Yeah. Anybody else watched Invincible? Come on. Can't just be Eagles fans out there that watched Invincible, right? It's a great story. So I love that word. I love that word, invincible. It is too powerful to be defeated or overcome. Invincible seems like a really good characteristic, doesn't it? I am invincible. You know, it seems, but not for ordinary people. Like for, Superman or Spider-Man or, some other superpower or, definitely a sports character of some kind. But have you ever looked in the mirror one morning and gone, I am invincible? Probably not. No. We know God gives us a characteristic in the fruits of the Holy Spirit in being invincible. And that is having invincible joy. You see, have you ever known that person who seems to be always joyful? Now, not that fake kind of joyful thing, but like real joy. That it seems like they never get over anxious, they never get carried away with negativity, and they always seem to be, kind of calm. And they see the bright side to every situation. You might call them, Susie Sunshine, or something like that, just because they get on your nerves, because they just have this invincible joy. And they do exist. These people do exist. The world might call them optimists, but I believe that we should call them Christians. You see, God designed each of us to have invincible joy. However, sometimes we let the world steal that away. So today we're going to talk about being in a spirit of invincible joy. Will you pray with me? Amazing God, I just ask that you allow us to hear you through this sermon. I ask you to give me the words and give me the direction so your people will strive for and pray for invincible joy. So, how many of you have often thought about Jesus in the sense of Jesus is very solemn. He always is very holy and proper. He doesn't laugh at fart jokes. But the Jesus, and they're fishermen that he's hanging around with. I'm sure that there's a few of them, right? And I think they're timeless. And, we always think of Jesus as being this guy who's super solemn. And actually, Jesus' personality was marked by joy. Now, if we look at the Webster's Dictionary definition of joy, it says to be happy or glad or to be cheerful. And, I think that is a definition of an expression of a wonderful emotion. However, to be happy or glad or cheerful, it is in response to something happening to you. So So something good happens, you're happy. Something funny happens, you're cheerful. However, it doesn't really get underneath a way of being. It's always a response to something. And it doesn't have the longevity that when the Bible talks about joy, that they mean that you can have joy all the time, no matter what circumstances are occurring in your life. In the Greek, the word chara is joy. And in some ways, they do define that the same way. They talk about joy and gladness and to rejoice. But in joy, the definition in the Bible is that joy is a response to God's presence. Now, when is God around? It's not a trick question. Always, right. So if our joy is a response to God, then if God is always there, then what should our response always be? Joy, right? So, it's that no matter what circumstances face us in life, if we are able to see God in it, well then we should be joyful. I could end the sermon right there and probably would make everyone happy because it's a little warm in here, but I'm not. Because I think that we need a little bit of definition around that. Because as soon as I say you need to be joyful always, you're ready to say to me, but you don't know what's going on in my life. You don't understand the things that I've faced. You see, we want to make our joy be into response of the things that we have. That, you have joy because you have a lot of money. You have joy because you like to party. You have joy because you're basing it on the fact that your money and your funny friends are going to make you happy all the time. But that kind of joy is here today and gone tomorrow. But the God-filled joy, the invincible joy, doesn't come about in that way. Invincible joy is not a response to anyone or anything. It is the joy of knowing God's unfailing presence. So, if joy is such an essential part of a Christian life, why are we not all joyful? Well, I think the first reason is because we accept the world's lies. That they try to tell us that we need to have certain things to make us happy, instead of just relying on the Holy Spirit. I know I've done this. If I only get to fill in the blank, then I will be happy. And then I kind of go off like Winnie the Pooh after the search of honey, right? And what happens after he eats the honey? He wants more, right? And that's what happens to us. If we had a car of our own, if we could move out of our parents' house, if we could marry the right person, if we could get the right job, if we could drive an awesome car, if we could live in the right neighborhood, and it goes on and on and on, and we are never fully happy, because the moment the honey is gone, we want more. You see, we tie ourselves and other people to our circumstances, and we allow the car or the education or the job or the person, the relationship, we allow that to take the place of God in our life. And when we remove God from the equation, or we put God as a secondary piece of our life, what happens is we lose our joy, and it's only short-lived happiness instead. And then another reason that we end up not having that joy-filled life is because we go and through these pursuits, and often they lead us down rabbit trails of sin. You see, trying to fill ourselves with joy, we end up with overconsumption. We end up with immorality and greed and overindulgence and power struggles. And I believe that even war is, in essence, it takes place because somebody thought that this was going to make them happy if they could only have power over X, Y, Z. I want you to think for a minute. When have you gone in some direction that was not led by God? And then you found yourself in a heap of problems. Anybody ever done that? Yeah, I know I have. Yeah, it looks so good. It looks so pretty. And it really wasn't. Invincible joy is taking on the hard stuff. It means that we are willing to follow God no matter what, even if it seems like it will lead us to suffering. You know, sometimes we have wandered off on our own, and we kind of find ourselves in a place that, you know, we never wanted to be in. We have an opportunity to have our joy restored today. If we are only willing to open our eyes to God's presence in our life, in the midst of our greatest troubles, if we are willing to open our eyes and say, God is here, we will have joy. Another reason we lose our joy is because we're either the person who's in trouble or we're the person who's taking on someone else's trouble. Are there any of you out there that are trouble taker-oners? I know that, you know, sometimes I feel like I need to take on the problems of the world on my own. And I forget that that is not my job. My job is to call on God and have God take over. But instead, you know, I'm like, okay, but I have to show Christian love to this person. But the trouble is, because I take on these problems myself, rather than realizing that I myself, I am not able to take on anything. I can't even take on the problem of the smallest ant. Instead, I need to point to Jesus. Jesus, who is capable of caring for all problems. And that's when joy becomes invincible. When I don't try to solve the problems of the world, or even this congregation, or my family on my own, but when I allow Jesus to be present, and I faithfully pray, and just are present for those people. There's a story, and I know it's a bit of a long story, but I really want to share it with you today. And it's the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor, he was a theologian, and he was a teacher. And he was very active in the German resistance against the Nazis. And his writings are amazing. And I'm going to share a little bit today from a letter that he wrote. And I'm going to put a link on the webpage that if you want to read more of this letter, you can link up to it and read it all. But I wanted you to know about probably one of the toughest situations to be in. And yet Bonhoeffer remained in God's presence and remained joyful. When the Nazis locked the doors of the seminary in which Bonhoeffer was connected to, he went and he took his theological training and he began to train young men as seminarians in kind of the underground. It was because of Bonhoeffer's efforts that there were clergy trained theologically throughout the war and then when the war was over. And at one point, Bonhoeffer became disillusioned and he left the country. And at one point he left for England, and then another time he left for America. The story tells that he actually took the last transport ship back to Germany before America closed its ports to any ships going to Germany. And he realized that he couldn't talk about the presence of God in all circumstances if he himself was not willing to be in those circumstances. Bonhoeffer went back to Germany and he continued to educate and support his fellow pastors. And at one point, the story tells us that he even became involved in an assassination plot. But he kind of thought better of that and realized that was taking it on himself. And instead, continued to feed and nurture the Christians around him. Bonhoeffer said at one time that one of the greatest burdens that he had was the burden for those pastors that were around him. He said the burden was so great because at any day, these men could be arrested. They had such anxiety about being caught and being executed, not only themselves, but the believers that were around them. And it just played havoc with their mental state. And he said that it was a battle against the temptation to spiritual indifference or to just surrender to all the pressures. You know, I think that happens to us, that when things are hard, instead of looking into the glowing face of Jesus, we look at our circumstances and they overwhelm us and we give up. And it's easy. The joy of God has gone through the poverty of the manger and the agony of the cross. And that is why it is invincible and irrefutable. It does not deny the anguish when it is there, but it finds God in the midst of it. It does not deny the grave sin, it finds instead forgiveness. And it looks death straight in the eye, but instead it finds life. Jesus went through poverty. He was homeless. He was poor. There were likely times that they were hungry. We know that there were so many human situations that he faced between his birth and the cross. And yet, he went through all of us so that we could have invincible joy. That God would be present in whatever circumstance we have. You see, the joy of God cannot be destroyed, no matter what the world tries to set against it. If it be, Hitler, if it's terrorist, if it's physical pain, if it's lost love, if it's the brokenness of death, nothing can break down the joy of God. It is there and available for us in all circumstances. Bonhoeffer goes on to explain that this joy that no one shall take from us belongs not only to those who have been called home, but also to those who are alive. Paige asked me this morning, if heaven was so wonderful, then why are we so afraid to die? You know, I think that in some ways, it's because we're afraid that heaven isn't going to be as wonderful as we hoped. And it's fear that creates that situation. But even for those who trust and believe that heaven is amazing, that God is saying you don't have to wait till heaven to have complete joy. It's offered for you right here and right now. God has endured it all so that we can rejoice in all circumstances. You see, it's something that we don't have to do alone. We don't have to do anything alone because God is present with us. Joy is constant appreciation and gratitude and gladness for having Jesus in our life. And so I ask you, are you prepared to embrace invincible joy? A couple weeks ago, I was listening to a sermon, and the pastor began the sermon and he said, I want you to be prepared to leave this place a different person than when you came in. First I thought, wow, that's pretty bold. And then I thought, you know, that should happen to us every week. Every time that we come before Christ, every time that we're in a Bible study, every time that we pray, every time that we come into this church, we should be prepared to leave different than we came in. And it is my prayer today that you will embrace the invincible joy of God. That you'll quit chasing after your own homemade happiness. That you'll let go of being Superman or Superwoman. And instead let God take on your burdens. And that you will be filled with God's Spirit and be filled with joy. That is available for all of us. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require anything of us. And taking the hand of Jesus, receiving him to walk before us in our lives. And so are you prepared to leave here today different than you came in? Are you ready to take on